Thank you. Our text this morning is Zechariah chapter 1, verses 7 to 21. Last week we looked at Zechariah's first vision, which is sort of an introduction for him to go talk to the fathers. Now we're going to look at 2 of 8 dream visions that he had and prophesied to the people. All 8 visions, it's my understanding, all came in one night. Zechariah chapter 1, verses 7 to 21, page 931, verse 7. Upon the 24th day of the 11th month, which is the month Shebat, in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of the Lord unto Zechariah the son of Barachi, the son of Iddo the prophet, saying, I saw by night, and behold, a man riding upon a red horse, and he stood among the myrtle trees that were in a bottom, and behind him were there red horses, speckled and white. Then said I, O my Lord, what are these? And the angel that talked with me said unto me, I will show thee what these be. And the man that stood among the myrtle trees answered and said, These are they whom the Lord has sent to go through the world. And they answered the angel of the Lord that stood among the myrtle trees and said, We have gone through the world, and behold, all the world sitteth still and is at rest. Then the angel of the Lord answered and said, O Lord of hosts, how long wilt thou be unmerciful to Jerusalem and to the cities of Judah, with whom thou hast been displeased now these 70 years? And the Lord answered the angel that talked with me with good words and comfortable words. So the angel that communed with me said unto me, Cry thou and speak, thus saith the Lord of hosts, I am jealous over Jerusalem and Zion with a great zeal, and am greatly angry against the careless heathen. For I was angry but a little, and they helped forward the affliction. Therefore thus saith the Lord, I will return unto Jerusalem with tender mercies. Mine house shall be built in it, saith the Lord of hosts, and a line shall be stretched upon Jerusalem. Cry yet and speak, thus saith the Lord of hosts, My cities shall yet be broken with plenty. The Lord shall yet comfort Zion, and shall yet choose Jerusalem. Then lifted I up mine eyes, and saw, and behold, 4 horns. And I said unto the angel that talked with me, What be these? And he answered me, These are the horns which have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. And the Lord showed me 4 carpenters. Then said I, What come these to do? And he answered and said, These are the horns which have scattered Judah, so that a man durst not lift up his head. But these are come to fray them, and to cast out the horns of the Gentiles, which lifted up their horn over the land of Judah, to scatter it. The title of our text this morning, Zechariah chapter 1, verses 7 to 21, the first 2 dream visions of Zechariah. In our last text, the prophet Zechariah began his prophetic ministry with a stern warning. The exiles were to be careful that they did not follow the sinful example of their fathers. Zechariah warned the exiles that their fathers had been given the word of God through the prophets Jeremiah, Isaiah, and Hosea. Yet their fathers refused to listen. Their disobedience, of course, was followed by the Babylonian captivity and decades of silence from God. Now, after many years, God is going to speak to his people again through the prophets Haggai and Zechariah. The people must be prepared to hear God's voice when he speaks through these prophets and obey. There are 2 points to our message this morning, verses 7 through 17. The first vision, rider on a red horse. And the second vision, verses 18 to 21, the vision of 4 horns and 4 carpenters. This morning we have the first 2 of 8 dream visions. These 2 visions, however, are connected. The first concerns God's promise to rebuild the second temple and usher in a golden age for the exiles. The second vision explains how God will subdue the enemies of Israel to make this golden age possible. We come to our first point, our first dream vision, rider on a red horse, verses 7 through 17, beginning at verse 7. Upon the 24th year of the 11th month, which is the month Shebat, in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of the Lord unto Zechariah, the son of Barachi, the son of Iddo the prophet, saying. We now come to the second prophecy of Zechariah to the exiles. The Jews must have responded well to the first prophecy because we have a second prophecy here given, made up of 8 dream visions that are all meant to encourage the exiles. This prophecy is said to have been in the month of Shebat, which corresponds to our late January or early February. This second prophecy and the visions following to the end of the 6th chapter were given 3 months after the first prophecy of Zechariah. Verse 8, and here's the dream. I saw by night, and behold, a man riding upon a red horse, and he stood among the myrtle trees that were in a bottom. And behold him were there red horses, speckled and white. Zechariah sees this vision while sleeping at night. In this vision, he sees a man who is none other than the Christ. He here appears in the form of a man. He is performing here the role of both intercessor and advocate for his people, the exiled church. He is called here a man to prefigure the human form that he will soon take according to the prophecy as the Messiah. We're told he is riding on a red horse, as does a king or the general of an army. This man, the Christ, is riding with speed to bring aid to his people, the church. He is riding a red horse, which is of course the same color horse that he was riding in Isaiah 63, 1-3, and in Revelation 6:4. This color is a symbol of the blood he will shed in his coming to avenge his people against their enemies. We are told also that the rider came to a stop and stood among myrtle trees to make himself ready to help when he is called upon. The myrtle tree is often used as a symbol of Israel or the righteous people. In other words, Christ comes to stand for and among the righteous, his church. We're told the trees were in a bottom, which means in a low valley, which represents the low condition of the church, according to historic testimony. Behind where Christ stood were 3 colored horses with riders, red, speckled, and white. That's what the horses were. The red may have stood for the bloody condition of the church, as well as prefiguring the bloody times of wars between the Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, and Roman empires. The speckled horses represent a mixture of good and bad, the bad being their captivity under Persia, the good being their return to the temple. The white horse represents the upcoming best days of the church, both in the coming of the Messiah and during the future millennial reign. Verse 9. Then said I, O my Lord, what are these? And the angel, that's capital A, Christ, that talked with me said unto me, I will show thee what these mean. We're told here that Zechariah then approached the rider on the red horse and he asked, O my Lord, what are these? Referring to the 3 horses. The rider, who is Christ, is here called an angel with an uppercase A because Christ is the uncreated and divine angel. That's why it's capital A. Christ promises Zechariah to expound on the meaning of the 3 horses and their riders. He's going to explain it. Verse 10. And the man, that is the Christ, that stood among the myrtle trees answered and said, These riders and 3 horses, are they whom the Lord has sent to go through the world. Christ answers that these 3 horsemen on these 3 horses are angels who have been sent to make a report concerning the various nations and empires in the world. The angels were sent throughout the earth to observe which empires were being helpful to the church and which empires were being hurtful or doing injuries to the church. Verse 11. And they answered the angel of the Lord that stood among the myrtle trees and said, here's the angel's report, We have gone through the world, and behold, all the world sitteth still and is at rest. After Christ explained the reason for the 3 angels on 3 horses, he prepared himself to hear their report. The ministering angels then explained to Christ, the angel of the Lord, their purpose while Zechariah listened. The angels reported that they have walked throughout the earth observing the behavior of the leaders of empires and nations in general throughout the world and are prepared to make their report to Christ about what they saw. the angels reported that the world sitteth still and is at rest. In other words, the heathen nations are prospering. They are worshiping their idols in peace. They had no trouble from the true church of Israel, and they had no threat from any enemy. In fact, all the wicked empires were free from wars, as history tells us was true during the time of Darius. The Jews of the church, on the other hand, were infested with enemies, like the Samaritans, who gave them trouble and hindered all they could the rebuilding of the temple. So what the angels report is that all the heathen religions were free to practice their idolatry in peace. But the one true religion was suffering greatly. Verse 12. Then the angel of the Lord answered and said, this is Christ speaking to the Father here, O Lord of hosts, how long wilt thou be unmerciful to Jerusalem and to the cities of Judah, with whom thou hast been displeased now these 70 years? When Christ, the angel of the Lord, heard the angels report that the godless empires of the world existed in peace, and that the true religion was completely suppressed, he offers the prayers of an intercessor to the Father. Christ was upset at the state of the church, and he asks the Father, how long wilt thou be unmerciful to Jerusalem? Christ is not questioning the mind and will of the Father, but he longs for mercy for the church, or Jerusalem. Israel has earned God's wrath over the past 70 years, but now those 70 years are past, and it has been over 80 years since Israel was carried off into captivity by Babylon. Is now, asked Christ, finally the time again to show favor to the church? That's what Christ is asking the Father. Verse 13, and the Lord, that is the Father, answered the angel, that is Christ, that talked with me with good words and comfortable words. Now God the Father answers the angel Christ with words, we're told, that are favorable to the near future and future of the church. The enemies of the church are soon to be addressed by the Father, and the peace and rest enjoyed by the heathen empires are about to be taken from them, and it will be the church that finally will enjoy some peace and rest. These words are a comfort to Christ, for the Father is no longer going to withhold mercy from his people as he did during the Babylonian exile. 14, verse 14. So the angel, that is Christ, that communed with me, Zechariah, said unto Zechariah, cry thou and speak. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I am jealous over Jerusalem and Zion with a great zeal. Since the Father answered the Son will now pass that answer on to Zechariah. Christ tells Zechariah, cry thou and speak, which refers to telling Zechariah to speak and write what he's about to tell them. Zechariah is to go to the exiles and tell them by preaching and by the written word that God is jealous over Jerusalem. These words should be a great comfort to the exiles who now have God working on their behalf. The love of the Father, we're told, has been heightened to a very high degree of compassion for his people and of indignation against the enemies and oppressors of the church. Verse 15, this is God and Christ speaking. And am greatly angered against the careless heathen. For I was angry but a little, and they helped forward the affliction. Furthermore, we're told Zechariah is to tell the people that God is very angry with the heathen, and Israel will see the anger of God manifested. That means shown. The heathen have provoked the Father by being at ease and secure in their strength while they were troubling God's church. God says that in comparison, he was a little displeased with Israel. But the heathen have so enraged the Father that Israel's crimes against him now bothers him less. In other words, the heathen's crime was they attempted to destroy Israel. Now it is true that God allowed Israel to fall into the hands of the heathens. But they needed to understand that God was only using the heathens to correct Israel. He was no friend to these heathens. But when the heathens tried to destroy Israel, they went too far. And now they will incur the wrath of God. In other words, by putting the Israelites as captives under the Babylonians, God only sought to wound Israel. But the heathen, they go too far. They are attempting to kill Israel. This wrath against all heathen enemies of the church will manifest itself in the destruction of the empires that enslaved Israel. God's going to severely judge these countries that were too hard on Israel. Verse 16. Therefore thus saith the Lord, I will return unto Jerusalem with tender mercy. Mine house shall be built in it, saith the Lord of hosts, and a line shall be stretched upon Jerusalem. Because the heathen were prospering while Israel suffered, and because they treated the church under God's discipline so poorly, God says that He's prepared to return His favor and blessing to the repentant exiles. God says, I will return unto Jerusalem with tender mercy. When God says that He is returning, He refers to His presence, which He had taken from the nation of Israel for some 70 years. Without the presence of God, the people had lost hope in ever seeing the temple reestablished for worship. But now God says that He will return His presence, which is accompanied by His tender mercy. The seemingly impossible task of rebuilding the temple will be a sign that God has returned His presence to Israel. It will be finished. The enemies of the work will be removed, and the second temple will display the glory promised through the prophet Haggai. Haggai chapter 2, verse 9. A glory that will even surpass the first temple, because it will have the Messiah in it. Furthermore, the rebuilding of the second temple will not be the only manifestation of God's returned presence. We're also told, a line shall be stretched upon Jerusalem, meaning the lines of a surveyor will be measured out. This refers to the future work of building. The surveyors will begin to mark out areas where the Jews will begin to rebuild their homeland. These lines will measure out the future work of building walls in the days of Nehemiah, expanding the temple in the days of Ezra, and it'll also be used to measure out future streets and gates and palaces and homes. In other words, surveyors are going to be busy because Israel is going to be reestablished. Jerusalem is going to be reestablished by the Jews. That's what this verse is saying. Verse 17, Christ says further to Zechariah, cry yet and speak, thus saith the Lord of hosts, my city shall yet be broken with plenty. The Lord shall yet comfort Zion, and shall yet choose Jerusalem. The phrase cry yet means to further prophesy to the people what more God intends to do for them. Now more instructions for the rebuilding of the city of Jerusalem are given to further encourage the people. God declares the city of Jerusalem His own, although it is in the hands of the Persian Empire. God will permit His people now to possess it in full. The returning exiles will live in a golden age when prosperity and happiness return to the city of Jerusalem. There will be greater and greater building projects. The city will become, we're told, beautiful again. And more exiles will return to repopulate Jerusalem. There will be an increase in wealth and cattle. In all this, the church will be comforted. Now, it should be noted that it will be another 70 years until Nehemiah comes and rebuilds the walls of the city. The rebuild will be very gradual. But after 140 years from the time of this prophecy, Jerusalem will once again be filled with Jews and was restored to its prosperity, which we see happens when Christ returns to Jerusalem. It's almost entirely inhabited and run by the Jews. We come to our second point in a very brief second vision. The vision of 4 horns and 4 carpenters. Verse 18. Then lifted I up mine eyes and saw, and behold, 4 horns. Zechariah was still in amazement concerning the first vision. He was overwhelmed to know that God had taken up the cause of the church. Zechariah must have been thrilled to hear that the city of Jerusalem was once again going to be inhabited by the faithful exiles who would prosper as they awaited the Messiah. Zechariah was not likely expecting another dream that same night, but when he looked again, he began to see another vision. In this second vision, he saw 4 horns which represented the 4 great enemies of the church. Horns are a symbol of strength and power. At times in the Bible, they even signify pride. In other contexts, horns may represent civil powers, states, or kingdoms. Here they likely represent 4 empires. Verse 19. And I said unto the angel that talked with me, what be these? And he answered me, this is Zechariah talking to Christ, these are the horns which have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. The prophet Zechariah asks for information from the angel, which is Christ. What be these? Or who are these horns and what do they represent? Christ tells Zechariah that they are 4 horns and they are powers, states, and kingdoms which have from all sides pushed at, broken, and harmed the church. This could likely refer to the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans of the future, or past enemies like the Moabites, Ammonites, or Egyptians. The point to be taken is that the 4 horns represent some power that had destroyed or greatly harmed the church. Verse 20. And the Lord showed me 4 carpenters. Christ then showed Zechariah 4 carpenters, but these are horns of iron. It is likely that what is meant by the term carpenters here is actually blacksmiths, as almost all the reformers said. Zechariah is able to tell they are blacksmiths by the way they are dressed and the tools they are holding. The function of these blacksmiths, we will see in the next verse, will be to destroy the horns. The picture is here of blacksmiths beating out metal with large hammers on their anvils. And so it will be that these blacksmiths beat out those nations that oppose Israel. These blacksmiths, however, are not friends of the church. They are enemies of the church, but they will be employed to destroy all enemies of the church. And you'll see that here in verse 21. Our final verse. Then said I, what come these to do? Zechariah speaking. And he, the angel Christ, answered and said, these are the horns which have scattered Judah, so that a man durst not lift up his head. But these are comes to fray them, and to cast out the horns of the Gentiles, which lifted up their horn over the land of Judah, to scatter it. Zechariah here, having seen the blacksmiths, asks a follow-up question. What come these to do? Or what role will these blacksmiths play for the building up of Israel and the destruction of its enemies? Christ says, these 4 horns represent the nations that have scattered Judah or thrown Israel into exile. They have been so oppressive to the church that a man durst not lift up his head. In other words, the scattered exiles of Israel have lived in fear of their despotic captives. They did not even possess the strength or courage to lift up their own heads against the cruelty of their oppressors. But these 4 blacksmiths or carpenters are emblems of those instruments God will employ in breaking these destroyers. Here are 4 carpenters to break the 4 horns. These blacksmiths will give these cruel nations a taste of their own medicine. They will strike fear into these nations, and the cruelty of these nations will be turned into fear. These nations, we're told, are particularly Gentile nations that have driven Israel into exile. Reformers generally agree that these blacksmiths represent nations that will destroy the enemies of Israel. So, for instance, one blacksmith is the Persians, who will dismantle and destroy the Babylonian Empire. The Persian Empire will be destroyed by another blacksmith, which is the Grecian Empire. The Grecian Empire, in turn, will be destroyed by the Roman Empire. And finally, the Roman Empire will be destroyed by the barbarian tribes of the Visigoths, the Huns, and the Vandals in the western part of the Roman Empire, and by the Muslim Turks in the eastern part of the Roman Empire. So we see from this vision the manner in which God will protect his church and keep any one nation from destroying the church. It's important to see that these 2 dreams are tied together. In the first dream, Israel's promised that it will be prosperous again. But they would have had trouble seeing how it was possible under the exile of Persia. They certainly could not see how they could have ever overpowered that kingdom. The answer is given in the second dream. God will use the wicked of one nation to destroy the wicked of another. The second dream explains how God intends to ensure the safety of prosperity of Israel by subduing and destroying all those who afflict the church. This concludes the first 2 of 8 dream visions that Zechariah saw all in one night. And when we gather again, we'll start looking at the 3rd through the 8th, which covers up through the 6th chapter of Zechariah. Let us pray. O Lord our God, may we be taught that the Word of God is further evidence that you are the one and only true God, for you have prophesied here which empires should rise and which empires should fall, and at the hands of which empires these should fall. As you have also foretold the fall of the Roman papacy and the increase of the great millennial church. And we do believe these promises are to happen as much as if they have already happened. For you have already declared it to be so in your providence. We do pray these things in thy Son's name. Amen. Conclude our worship with the singing of Psalm 90. We've been looking at a psalm of Moses, how they were written in the wilderness. Moses has been talking about how short the life of man is. We'll finish by singing verses 13 to 17 to the tune of Spore. Once again, Moses says, since life is so short, he asks God, after these 400 and some years where God had barely spoken to Israel while they were in Egyptian captivity and in the wilderness wandering, he asks God to return his presence to Israel and his beauty to Israel, because life is so short and they long to have the presence of God revealed to them in their short lifetimes. Verses 13 to 17 to the tune of Spore. Turn yet again to us, O Lord, how long thus shall it be? Let it repent thee now for those that servants are to thee. With thy tender mercies, Lord, us early satisfy, so we rejoice shall all our days, and still be glad in thee. According as the days have been, wherein we grief have had, and years wherein we ill have seen, so do thou make us glad. Let thy work and power appear, thy servants' face before, and show unto their children dear thy glory evermore. And let the beauty of the Lord our God be us upon, our handiworks establish them each one. The Lord God of your fathers make you 1,000 times so many more as you are, and bless you as he hath promised you. Amen.